this information or this knowledge of God as a friendship that is capable of enormous growth and to move into various stages of union and even unity with God is the heart of the Christian religion. This is what converted me to the Christian religion when I was in school and reading the modern philosophers and wondering whether there really was any substance to the Catholic religion in which I had been brought up. I had serious doubts at that point. But I came across a book in this library where I was in college. And I don't know whether anybody ever looked at it before I did or since. But it was a great gift because in it was the four Gospels with a line-by-line exegesis, that is, explanation of the meaning of the text as understood by the great fathers of the church, East and West, as they were remembered by the prodigious memory of Thomas Aquinas, who they say never forgot anything he ever read. He read quite a bit. Anyway, for me, it was like the opening of the world. I mean, the world I had known and the religion I had known as Catholic underwent a paradigmatic change or shift. And now I saw as clearly as the hands in front of my eyes that the Christian religion is about transformation of consciousness, transformation of faith, hope, and love into intimate relationships with God in which we perceive how close God actually is to us all the time, surrounding us with the energy that keeps us in being, body, soul, and spirit at every moment, but that this energy that holds us in being, creating us continuously, is also surrounding us with unconditional love, with an immense and boundless concern that is unbelievable. And it's the awareness, I think, of this closeness that enables prayer to start from the proper place. Unfortunately, we start from our idea of God, as we picked it up along the way in our Christian education, where God is sometimes misrepresented, not so much as a specific error, but as something in which the negative aspects of God are presented first. The gospel, as you know, means good news. Well, in my youth, the first thing we heard was the bad news. That is, how bad we are, how tough off we are, how hopeless we are, all of which may be true, but it's not something you tell a child, for God's sake. There's been an incredible, unenlightened way of presenting God to children for several centuries. And now that developmental psychology has instructed the world in some sense of how to proceed in educating a child, it's taking much too long for the religions of the world to catch on. All of these great institutions have been hanging around for several thousand years or more, and so they don't change overnight. They haven't caught up with the internet and instant communication. And so they seem to some of us to be hopelessly out of date in the way they relate to the contemporary world. Well, this was really the focus of a lot of the reforms or of attitudes that Vatican II, the Second Vatican II, suggested. It was about how do you relate to the modern world, the great truths of the Christian faith, in such a way that people can be truly nourished and understand them. We're only at the very beginning of this task. But the renewal of contemplative prayer would be an enormous step forward, and everybody who makes an effort in their own lives to to submit or to grasp this tradition and its meaning will find their idea of their religion greatly improved for the better, whatever particular difficulties you might have with it or its members. Contemplative prayer is the communication of the way God sees things. It's an awakening of the presence of God within us. The doctrine is called the divine indwelling, which means that the Trinity itself, the source of all that is, dwells in us and is leading its interior life within us and inviting us to participate in this infinite happiness that God enjoys, in which this world is meant to be a gradual preparation of body, soul, and spirit to enjoy the banquet of heaven. These are all metaphors and images, of course. But so in this saying of Jesus, in Matthew 6:6, that I just mentioned, he's inviting us to participate in the heart of the Christian religion and is giving us a couple of windows on how we might proceed to penetrate into the heart of God, not just intellectually, but actually, that is, experientially, which is the true knowledge that Paul speaks about in his epistles and prays that his disciples and students might receive. And so I would suggest that praying in secret, which Jesus says in his wisdom saying, is the way to proceed in order to join at the deepest level the experience of God within us, is waiting, in other words, for our accessing. In other words, God is present and we don't know this. Not in the deep knowledge of experience that Paul is speaking about. And yet all the sacraments, all forms of prayer, all good works are all orientated towards awakening us to this inner depth of the treasure of the divine presence, which we have been given totally gratuitously. Our problem is basically, since we lost on the broad level of Christian experience, the contemplative experience, we think of God in terms of human experience, which is extremely limited and is sometimes positively insulting for God. You wouldn't treat a dog the way most of us treat God, even a nice dog. There's no grasp, there's no penetrating grasp in the Christian population as a whole that can respond to those great sayings of Jesus in his last speech to his disciples at the Last Supper, where he prays that we might experience the same unity with him and the Father that he experiences with the Father. Now this is an almost incredible request, but it's based on ontological facts that coming from God, we haven't left God, that all of us in some way we don't understand are in God, that God is the ground of our being, and that our failure to see this is the source of all our difficulties and all our search for happiness in the wrong places, and which turns our life into a search for misery rather than the happiness that God wills that we should have. Now you say, well, if he wills it that hard, why doesn't he give it to us? Because at the same time, he wants us to respond to him as human beings, that is, with a certain freedom, so that God will always respect our freedom, even to the point of saying no to God's love, or even to the point of rejecting God, even to the point of deliberate sin. You can't even do that without God's help, because he's the one who's supporting all our faculties, body, soul, and spirit. So this centering prayer then, to give a very brief survey of Christian anthropology, at least according to St. Thomas Aquinas, consists of levels of movement towards the center of our being, which is where God dwells, and out of which we emerge at every nanosecond of time, whether you know it or not. Contemplative prayer is a way of getting to know this presence, and even to know it all the time. In other words, it's the permanent presence of God, the realization of God as our constant companion, the realization of God as working with us in all the details of life in order to enable us to become the purity, or to achieve the purity of heart, which is entirely his gift, but which depends on our freedom or willingness to accept.